Welcome to the virtual office hours, everyone. My name is John Fia. I teach history here at Messiah College, chair of the history department. This is episode 3 in our series on Christian America, or was America founded as a Christian nation? Now we're going to be focusing on that through much of this year. Our producer, Abby Blakeney, is behind the camera, as usual, right? That's her hand. The founding fathers, of course, are with me. Now let's review a little bit. In the last 2 virtual office hours, well, actually the first one of the season, I kind of introduced this topic. We have this new book, or actually a second edition of the Was America Founded as a Christian Nation book coming out. So I've been kind of revisiting this theme in my own mind, and I thought I would share some things, what I'm thinking with you, and really rehash some of the things that are already in the book, especially in light of our current political climate here in an election year, or at least an election year coming up. Feels like it's already started, though. Last week we tried to define our terms. What do we mean by Christian? What do we mean by nation? What do we mean by the United States? You know, these kinds of things are very complex, these definitions, because they mean different things in different time periods. So it's very difficult to kind of answer this question, was America founded as a Christian nation? Because those terms often mean different things in different moments of history. Today I want to dive into some material with you, if you will. And what I want to spend the next several weeks doing is thinking about the notion that Americans have always seen themselves as living in a Christian nation. Now, that's not a statement about whether or not they're right to believe that, right? Or it's not a statement of whether or not they're interpreting the Constitution or interpreting the Founding Fathers correctly. It's a historical statement. Americans have always seen themselves as living in a Christian nation. I was speaking at in Newport, Rhode Island I think this was last year, maybe 2 years ago, and I was with one of the people on the panel with me was a Jewish American. The panel was on religious freedom, and we happened to be talking about the Toro Synagogue there in Newport. We were actually in the Newport Quaker Meeting House, and this scholar said, you know, when I suggested the idea that Americans have always seen themselves as being part of a Christian nation, this Jewish scholar agreed wholeheartedly. And now, of course, he saw himself as being a kind of dissenter in that Christian nation. But as a historical statement, Professor Feldman thought that was clearly the case. Now, what I want to do is maybe go through some periods in American history and show you the ways in which various groups and people have interpreted the idea that we are living in a Christian nation. And in the couple minutes here I have with you today, I want to talk about the early American Republic, the period, say, from the Constitution in 1787 through, you know, the 1830s, 1840s, maybe the lead up to the Civil War. In order to understand the Christian identity of the United States in this period, you have to think about the First Amendment. The First Amendment, especially the Establishment Clause, which says there will be no state church, there will be no established church in the United States. In other words, the government will not sponsor a church, taxpayer money will not go to support a particular church, one particular church or another, a particular denomination even. And in order to understand, again, the Christian dimensions of the next 50, 60 years, you have to see what the results of the First Amendment are. No longer is any church going to be privileged. That means you're going to have what historians have described as a kind of religious consumerism, in which churches are going to have to provide a form of spirituality, a form of religion that people are attracted to, are going to commit to. They're going to want to attend this church, so you need whether it be a good preacher, whether it be a good building, whatever it is, you have religious competition as a result of the First Amendment when you separate church and state. So the separation of church and state, which often many people believe is not, you know, a good thing, especially Christian conservatives, that's not a good thing, the separation of church and state, because it takes religion out of public life. If you did not have the separation of church and state, you would not have this religious competition, and you would not have this flourishing of religion in the early 19th century, associated with a huge evangelical revival known as the Second Great Awakening. So in the early 19th century, because of the First Amendment, because of the separation of church and state. Now, I know that phrase, separation of church and state, is not in the Constitution, but I'm assuming it is. It's connected to that idea of the establishment or the disestablishment clause. Because of the First Amendment, you are then able to have more and more religions flourish. New religions begin to emerge, like Mormonism and some of the churches of Christ and so forth in the South. You have a huge evangelical revival. And in the early 19th century, I would argue America, at least culturally, not politically or in terms of the government endorsing one religion, but culturally, America is a more Christian, I would even say a more evangelically Protestant Christian nation culturally than it's ever been before. We'll continue this story as we move into the Civil War, and I'll try to develop it a little bit over the course of the next couple of weeks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Virtual Office Hours.